London, March 1889. The rain had not stopped for hours. It traced silver ribbons down the narrow window panes of my drawing room, dripping into the stone gutters below with the precision of a metronome. Inside, the only sound was the soft tick-tock of the clock above the mantel and the occasional hiss of my oil lamp, threatening to extinguish itself under the weight of its own weariness. I, Clara Ashburn, 27 years of age, sat hunched over my writing desk with pen trembling in hand. I did not intend to write a confession. No, what spills onto these pages tonight is less a plea for forgiveness and more preservation of sensation. The raw impressions of a woman who has tasted the shimmering promise of a substance that our society has dressed in silk and silver. They call it tonic, remedy, elixir. Doctors prescribe it. Priests bless it. Gentlemen toast to it. And ladies like me, delicate and restless, drink it as if it were holy water. The word itself feels scandalous to whisper, cocaine. And yet in Victorian England is no scandal at all. It is a companion, a quiet conspirator. It lingers in our morning teas, hides in the toothpastes arranged neatly upon our washstands, perfumes the face creams sold in little rose-edged jars, and even sweetens the bonbons exchanged at soirees. Men light it in cigarettes scented with mint. Children nibble it in chocolate squares wrapped in golden foil. One need not prowl in alleyways for it. No, it sits politely in the chemist's cabinet, labeled invigorating and soothing, waiting for us with a smile of legitimacy. I once believed all of it, wholeheartedly, since the age when corsets first bound my ribs and society bound my tongue. I had suffered the malaise physicians dubbed melancholia of spirit. It is a phrase they use often, almost lazily, for women like me who are too quick to sigh, too prone to solitude, too unwilling to bow our heads at every command. My body often felt frail, my heart easily weary, my soul restless as though trapped in a cage lined with velvet. I did not crave rebellion for its own sake. I simply longed to feel alive. And then, like a whispered promise, came the stories. Ladies at tea spoke in conspiratorial tones. Have you tried the new Coca-Cola tonic? Why, a single glass leaves one radiant for the entire evening. Gentlemen bragged that Thomas Edison himself swore by it, while newspapers carried advertisements with florid script. Restores vitality, clears the mind, awakens passion. Even sermons hinted that such remedies might lift the fatigue of the devout during Lent. A nation was baptizing itself in white powder, and we, the women caught between virtue and yearning, were the first to kneel at the altar. I recall the evening as if etched into my very skin. It had been a dreadful dinner party in Bloomsbury, suffocating with dull politics and forced laughter. I returned home under a drizzle that clung to my bonnet and seeped through my gloves. The gas lamps flickered along the pavement, their halos blurred by mist. On impulse, I stopped before the chemist's shop, its windows aglow like a beacon in the dreary night. Inside, Mr. Crenshaw, a stout man with spectacles perpetually sliding down his nose, greeted me with a knowing smile. "Miss Ashburn," he said, "you look pale, fatigued. I have just the thing." He lifted a bottle the color of caramel sunlight. Coca-Cola, the label declared in elaborate script. Non-alcoholic, he assured me. Recommended by physicians, praised by the Holy Father himself, and admired by Mr. Edison. Quite the endorsement, don't you agree? I laughed despite myself. To think a drink could unite the Pope and the Wizard of Electricity seemed absurd. Yet his tone, his certainty, dissolved my skepticism. I allowed him to pour a glass. The liquid glimmered as though alive. I raised it to my lips. The first sip was sweet, syrupy, with a hint of citrus and spice. Pleasant, nothing more. The second sip tingled. My pulse quickened, a warmth spread across my chest, and I felt the corners of my mouth curve into a smile I had not rehearsed. By the third sip, I was aflame. My cheeks flushed crimson, my skin shimmered with sudden vitality. and my thoughts danced so swiftly that I could scarcely hold them still. I laughed, truly laughed, right there in the chemist's shop. Mr. Crenshaw adjusted his glasses. Just coca leaves and colonet, he said soothingly. A trace amount, barely worth noting. But I knew. Oh, I knew. Something far more powerful than colonet was coursing through me. When I reached home, I was no longer the timid Clara who sat demurely at soirees, clutching her teacup as men droned on about empire and industry. I paced my room with restless joy. I composed 3 letters in one sitting, one to my estranged cousin, one to my childhood friend in Bath, and one to no one at all, a love letter to the universe itself. I stood before the mirror and delivered a speech to my reflection, a speech fit for Parliament, though addressed only to the silent walls. My eyes blazed, my lips trembled with ideas. Sleep never came, but for the first time in years, I did not miss it. As dawn crept through the curtains, pale and judgmental, I gazed at my reflection. My hair had loosened from its pins, my gown wrinkled from my restless pacing. Yet I looked radiant, wild, alive, almost dangerous. And there, in the stillness, a question lodged itself deep within me, a question that would haunt every step I took thereafter. If a single glass could ignite such fire in me, what might a lifetime of this elixir transform me into? That night, that innocent, rain-soaked night, was my beginning. The first step onto a path paved with sweetness, luster, delirium, and ruin. A path that I would not turn back from. I woke the morning after my first taste of Coca-Cola with no memory of sleep. My body had not rested, yet I felt no fatigue. Instead, I was thrumming, every limb humming like the strings of a harp too tightly wound. My hands trembled as though eager to write, to touch, to seize something they had never held before. The sunlight that crept through the lace curtains appeared sharper than usual, each beam a blade of gold. I found myself staring at the dust motes drifting in its path, mesmerized by their dance. They seemed to move with purpose, as if carrying secrets only I could decipher. A laugh escaped me, startling in its freedom. But most startling of all was the hunger in me, not for bread or tea, but for more of that syrupy fire. More of that restless certainty that I could conquer the world if only I kept sipping. By afternoon, I returned to the chemist's shop. Mr. Crenshaw raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. He poured me another glass, a little fuller this time. The liquid shimmered, rich and promising. I drank quickly, greedily, as though it were water after a long drought. The effect came swifter now, like an old friend sliding into my veins. Heat spread across my chest, up my throat, into my face. My pulse pounded. The dull ache that had so often haunted me, that sluggish melancholy of long afternoons, filled with embroidery and forced civility, evaporated in an instant. I felt awake in every sense of the word, mind sharpened, body quickened, heart reckless. I walked out into the London air, and the world had changed. Or perhaps I had. The cobblestones seemed polished, reflecting the gas lamps, though it was not yet dusk. The clip-clop of horses' hooves echoed like music, a symphony written just for me. Even the smell of smoke and damp wool rising from passers-by stirred me to strange delight. I wanted to touch it all, to breathe it in, to devour life whole. A gentleman brushed past me, tipping his hat. For a moment, I caught the glint of his eye. My cheeks burned. Never before had a passing glance made my breath hitch, my stomach tighten with something perilously close to desire. But now my skin was alive, aflame, desperate for contact. The brush of his sleeve against mine seemed an intimacy too great to bear. I hurried on, my heart rattling like a caged bird. When I reached home, I could not sit still. The parlor felt suffocating, its heavy curtains and stiff furniture mocking my restless energy. I paced, then laughed, then twirled as if in dance, though no music played. My reflection in the gilded mirror startled me. eyes wide, pupils dilated, hair slipping from its pins. I looked not demure but feral, and thrillingly so. On the mantel sat the letter I had scrawled in my frenzy the night before, addressed to no one, filled with declarations of love to the world. I read it aloud, voice quivering with intensity. The words, florid, nonsensical, nonetheless moved me to tears. I pressed the paper to my lips, imagining it a lover's mouth. The thought shocked me. Never had I considered myself a woman of such impulses. My upbringing had been steeped in restraint. Smile politely, lower the gaze, keep passion tucked beneath layers of fabric and propriety. Yet in that moment, under the intoxication of coca and cola, I burned with craving not merely for romance, but for touch, for ecstasy, for the surrender of body to sensation. I pressed my palm against my breastbone, feeling the frantic flutter of my heart. Each beat seemed to cry, more, more, more. That evening, I dared what I never had before. I poured the remainder of the tonic into a wine glass, not the small chemist's cup, but a vessel of elegance, as though sanctifying the ritual. I raised it to the lamplight, admiring its amber glow, and whispered to myself, to life. Then I drank deeply, every drop. The transformation was immediate, electric. The room tilted, not with drunkenness, but with energy so pure it felt divine. My hands clutched the fabric of my skirts, my body shuddering as if a storm had taken residence within me. My breath grew heavy, quick. My skin prickled. Thoughts burst like fireworks, plans for novels unwritten, speeches unspoken, loves unclaimed. I was larger than myself, larger than the house, larger than London itself. I staggered to the window, flung it open, and inhaled the cold night air. The city lay below me, sprawling, pulsing with lamplight and carriage wheels. I spread my arms as though to embrace it all. For an instant, I truly believed I might take flight, that if I leapt from the sill, I would soar rather than fall. But more than anything, I wanted to feel, to be touched, kissed, consumed. Every nerve in me screamed for intimacy. My lips tingled with phantom kisses. My thighs trembled with anticipation of a closeness I could not name. I collapsed onto the chaise, trembling. The fire in the grate crackled, and in its flicker, I imagined figures dancing, men, women, shadowy shapes offering hands, beckoning me into their embrace. My body ached to answer, and yet I was alone. Alone with my breath, ragged and uneven. Alone with my cheeks flushed scarlet, my bodice damp with sweat. Alone with the terrible, exquisite knowledge that a single glass had undone decades of repression, had stripped me bare, had shown me what lay beneath the mask of propriety. I laughed then, high and sharp, startling even to myself. And when the laughter subsided, I whispered into the silence, "If this is sin, then let me never be virtuous again." That was the night I ceased to be merely Clara Ashburn, dutiful daughter, polite guest, obedient woman. That was the night cocaine claimed me, body and soul, and promised me a world brighter, hungrier, and far more dangerous than any sermon or etiquette book had ever dared describe. I drank and I awoke, but in awakening I began to dream a dream from which I may never escape. It began innocently, as all obsessions do. At first, there were only the glasses of tonic, a treat for evenings when melancholy pressed too heavily upon my shoulders. But soon I discovered it waiting for me in other forms, subtle, polite, nestled into the very rituals of daily life, until there was no corner of my existence untouched by the white powder's embrace. Morning brought toothpaste. Yes, toothpaste. A little porcelain jar, no larger than a teacup, its lid painted with roses and the proud label, "Coca denifrice, invigorates the mouth, whitens the teeth, enlivens the spirits." I remember the first morning I dipped my brush into it. The paste smelled faintly of mint and citrus, pleasant enough. But the moment it touched my tongue, a shock coursed through me. My gums tingled, my lips grew warm, and a rush of clarity shot straight to my temples. By the time I spat into the basin, I was already grinning at my reflection, flushed and giddy, as if I had been kissed awake. Who would question a woman brushing her teeth? No one. And yet, behind that ordinary ritual, I was already feeding the hunger. Afternoons belonged to creams and cosmetics. The ladies in my circle were quick to whisper of them, jars of pale pink salve sold as complexion restorers, promising to soften wrinkles and brighten cheeks. They were laced, of course, with coca extract. I bought one, telling myself it was vanity, nothing more. But the first time I smoothed it onto my skin, I felt it seep deeper than the surface. My face tingled, then glowed. My heartbeat fluttered as if beneath my very cheeks. My lips parted of their own accord, my breath came quick, and I found myself touching my own throat with trembling fingers, marveling at the heat beneath my skin. The cream did not only promise beauty, it awakened desire. Soon, I was applying it not once, but thrice a day, painting my face with invisible fire. Watching the mirror transformed me into a woman both softer and sharper, both delicate and feral. I no longer knew if men admire radiance, or if they simply sensed the fever within me. Evenings were sweetest of all, for by then came the bonbons. Little chocolate confections wrapped in foil, nestled in gilt boxes tied with ribbon. They were advertised as restoratives for female melancholy. How genteel it sounded, as if the cure for sadness might be a sweet after supper. I attended a gathering one Thursday where these candies were offered on a silver tray. One by one, we ladies took them, laughing at the extravagance, but within minutes, the room shifted. Our laughter grew shriller, our words sharper, our cheeks aglow. One woman began to sing, another to recite poetry. A third clasped my hand suddenly, her eyes wide, and whispered, "Do you feel it too?" Oh, I felt it. A rush of warmth between my ribs, a looseness in my limbs, a giddy spark that made every touch linger. It was as though propriety had been draped in lace and set gently aside. We were not wild, not yet, but we were no longer restrained. And I craved more. Within weeks, I had acquired my own box of cocaine bonbons, tucked it into the drawer of my writing desk. Each evening I promised myself only one, yet each evening I reached for another. One to soften the loneliness of an empty parlor, another to sweeten the dullness of correspondence. A third, perhaps, to steady my nerves before bed. By the time I extinguished the lamp, I had eaten half the box, my lips sticky with chocolate and intoxication. Soon, every hour of the day belonged to it. Morning toothpaste, afternoon creams, evening bonbons, nighttime tonics. It was no longer a choice, but a rhythm. Without it, I felt sluggish, heavy, useless. With it, I was radiant, inspired, alive. And yet, there was something else stirring within me. I began to notice the effect it had not only on my mind, but on my body. My skin seemed more sensitive, my breath shallower, my pulse quicker at the lightest brush of contact. Once, when the maid adjusted the laces of my corset, her knuckles grazing my spine, I nearly gasped aloud. Another time, as I brushed against a stranger in the marketplace, my knees nearly buckled. The drug was teaching me to desire, not abstractly, not modestly, but viscerally. And so my days, once bland as porridge, were now charged with secret electricity. A glance could ignite me. A smile could unravel me. My very reflection in the mirror made my heart beat faster, as though I were falling in love with myself, or perhaps with the fever that blazed inside me. I told myself it was harmless. Everyone used it. The papers praised it. The chemists sold it openly. It was respectable, even fashionable. How could one call an obsession sinful if society itself applauded? But late at night, when the house fell silent and I sat alone at my desk, my hands still trembling, my thoughts racing faster than my pen could follow, I wondered, Was I still Clara Ashburn? Or was I only the powder now, the powder in my teeth, on my skin, in my blood, in my very breath? For even as I write this, my tongue aches for the sting of the paste, my lips for the tingle of the cream, my stomach for the fire of the bonbon, my throat for the syrupy rush of the tonic. It is no longer a remedy. It is me. And that truth terrifies me more than any sermon of hellfire ever could. There comes a night in every obsession when secrecy no longer suffices, when the hunger spills from private corners into the open, daring the world to watch. For me, that night was Lady Harrow's soiree. Lady Harrow was infamous for her gatherings. Her house stood on Cavendish Square, a stately Georgian residence by day. But by night it transformed into something else entirely, a theater where propriety was both costume and joke. Invitations were coveted and whispered about. The respectable rarely admitted to attending, yet somehow everyone of interest found their way through her doors. I remember arriving, heart already racing from the tonic I had sipped before leaving. The grand hall was ablaze with candlelight, crystal chandeliers scattering fire across the ceiling. Music drifted from a string quartet in the corner, though their bows moved with a languid rhythm, as if they too had tasted what awaited. It was not long before the tray appeared. A footman, solemn as a priest, carried a silver salver laden with delicate glasses, each filled with amber liquid. Cocoa wine, they called it, though the city's temperance laws had long since forbidden such things. Yet here it was, disguised as elegance, offered as casually as a biscuit. I took one. The first sip was familiar, soothing, like an old lover's embrace. But in that room, among so many glittering eyes and flushed cheeks, the effect multiplied. Within minutes, I felt the same heat coursing through me, the same shimmer in my skin, the same restless hunger, and then came the cigarettes. Slim, perfumed, wrapped in paper finer than my writing sheets. They were passed from hand to hand, lit with a spark, inhaled with laughter. I had never smoked before, yet that evening I accepted without hesitation. The smoke entered me like velvet fire, filling my chest, expanding me. My head swam, not with dizziness, but with clarity so sharp it felt erotic. I saw the room differently then. The gentlemen's eyes lingered longer, their smiles looser, their hands less restrained. The ladies, usually so stiff in their corsets, leaned closer, spoke louder, their laughter spilling like champagne. Everywhere I turned, there were flushed faces, parted lips, gloved fingers brushing against bare wrists. It was not a soiree. It was a fever. I recall standing near the pianoforte when a gentleman, a stranger, tall, his hair dark as midnight, approached me. He bowed, but his bow was careless, his eyes bold. "Miss Ashburn," he said, though how he knew my name I cannot say. "You look incandescent." The word struck me, incandescent, as though I were not merely alive, but aflame. I laughed, high, sharp, foreign, even to myself. "It is only the room," I said, "too warm." But we both knew it was not the room. His hand brushed mine as he offered a cigarette. The contact was nothing, a mere graze, yet it sent a shiver through me so violent I nearly gasped. I accepted the cigarette, inhaled, and exhaled into the air between us. Our eyes locked through the haze. In that moment, words were useless. The drug spoke louder than language. Around us, the soiree unraveled. One lady discarded her fan and leaned against the mantel, laughing too loudly at nothing. Another sat at the piano, striking wild chords, her hair falling loose. Couples drifted toward shadowed corners, hands clutching, lips whispering. The quartet abandoned their instruments altogether, two of them embracing openly while the others cheered. The air grew thick with smoke, perfume, sweat, and still the trays circulated, more wine, more bonbons, more cigarettes. No one refused, no one wanted to. For the first time in my life, I felt unshackled from the iron cage of etiquette. I was not Clara Ashburn, dutiful and polite. I was Clara, the body, the hunger, the fire. Every nerve was awake, every sense sharpened to unbearable sweetness. The silk of my gown against my thighs was a caress. The pressure of my corset became an ache of pleasure rather than restraint. My very breath seemed a lover's kiss. The stranger leaned close, his voice low. "You are trembling." "I cannot stop," I whispered, "nor should you." His hand grazed my arm, and I thought I might collapse beneath the weight of sensation. Not because of him alone, but because the drug had turned every touch, every glance into a conflagration. It was as though desire itself had been distilled and poured into our veins. I do not know how long the night lasted, hours perhaps, or only minutes. Time melted into heat and laughter, into the sound of glasses clinking, of silk rustling, of breath quickening in shadowed alcoves. What I remember most is the feeling, the sense that the entire room pulsed with one body, one heartbeat, one fevered lust. We were no longer individuals bound by rank and etiquette. We were creatures of sensation driven by the same relentless craving. And I was no longer merely part of it. I was at its center. At one point, I caught sight of myself in a gilt mirror across the room. My face was flushed, my hair tumbling loose, my eyes wide and glimmering. I looked almost unrecognizable, not demure, not contained, but radiant, dangerous, alive. A goddess intoxicated by her own divinity. I should have been ashamed. A proper lady would have fled, would have blushed, would have clutched her pearls and prayed for forgiveness, but I felt none of that. Instead, I whispered to my reflection, "This is who I was meant to be." By dawn, the house was hushed. Bodies lay sprawled across divans, half asleep, half drunk with lingering ecstasy. I slipped away quietly, the taste of smoke and sugar still on my tongue, my body still trembling. Outside, the city was gray, damp, indifferent. But within me, the fever burned on. And as I walked home through the mist, one thought repeated in my mind, steady as a drum, I will never be satisfied again without it. I do not know when indulgence became mania. Perhaps it was gradual, a little more each day, a paste upon the teeth, a cream upon the cheeks, a bonbon after supper, a glass before bed. Or perhaps there is always a single moment, a line crossed without notice, after which one is no longer mistress of her desires, but servant to them. For me, that line came one fevered evening when restraint dissolved entirely. I had gathered a box of chocolates, a bottle of tonic, and a packet of cigarettes perfumed with coca. Alone in my room, I told myself I would sample a little of each, nothing more. A taste for sweetness, a sip for clarity, a puff for calm. But the hunger within me had grown insatiable. The first piece of chocolate melted on my tongue with a rush of heat. The second made my skin prickle with delight. By the third, my hands shook as though I had been struck by lightning. I poured a glass of tonic to steady myself, though it did the opposite. The syrup slid down my throat, heavy and sweet, and my heart exploded into motion. My breath came ragged. My eyes darted wildly across the room, noticing details I had never seen before, the faint cracks in the plaster ceiling, the pattern of dust upon the mantel, the glimmer of a spider's thread caught in the lamplight. Each seemed magnificent, worthy of worship. Then came the cigarette. I lit it with trembling hands, inhaled deeply, exhaled into the air. The smoke swirled, luminous, alive. I swear it formed shapes, faces, figures, angels or demons, I could not say. They danced across the walls, bowed to me, whispered in voices only I could hear. I began to laugh. Not a polite laugh, not a girlish giggle, but wild, sharp, unrestrained. A sound echoed off the walls, and in it I heard power. I felt invincible. I paced the room with energy too great for my body, reciting lines of poetry I had not read in years. Shakespeare, Milton, verses learned in childhood rose unbidden from my lips. My arms flung wide, as if conducting an orchestra no one else could hear. My heart thundered like a drum, yet I welcomed the beat. For in those moments, I believe myself transformed. I was not Clara Ashburn, weak and melancholy, bound by corsets and convention. I was something greater. A prophetess, perhaps, or goddess. My reflection in the mirror gleamed with unearthly brilliance, eyes vast, cheeks blazing, lips parted as though to deliver divine pronouncements. I knelt before my own image, laughing, weeping, whispering, "You are immortal. You are eternal. You will never fade." I felt as though I could fly, truly fly out the window, across the rooftops, into the clouds. I leaned upon the sill, wind rushing against my face, arms spread like wings. For a breathless instant, I was certain that if I leapt, the air would hold me, that the city below would bow in awe as I soared. It was only the sudden cry of a carriage horse on the street that broke the spell, startling me back from the edge. Yet even then, my heart thrilled at the danger. I turned from the window and collapsed onto the chaise, trembling. My skin was slick with sweat, my gown clinging to me like a lover. Every nerve screamed with sensation. My thighs quivered, my breasts heaved, my body ached for touch, any touch, as though the drug had transformed me into pure desire. I pressed my hands against my own flesh, desperate to contain the fire. Hallucinations crowded in. The wallpaper shifted, patterns forming shapes of beasts and angels, curling, writhing. The carpet beneath my feet rippled like water. The clock upon the mantel stretched and worked, its tick-tock slowing, then racing, then slowing again. Time unraveled, meaningless. I do not know how long I raved. At one point, I remember scribbling furiously in my diary, words tumbling too fast to capture. At another, I recall singing, my voice breaking, echoing through the empty house like a hymn. I fell to my knees, clutching at the carpet, praying not to God, but to the drug itself, begging it never to leave me. And then darkness. I awoke hours later, sprawled upon the floor, my hair tangled, my gown twisted, my body aching. My mouth was dry, my heart weak, my limbs heavy as stone. Every muscle screamed in protest. I tried to stand, but collapsed again, trembling, breath shallow. The ecstasy was gone. Only ruin remained. Yet even in that ruin, as pain throbbed in my skull and sickness clawed at my stomach, I felt the hunger stir again. My body begged for more chocolate, more tonic, more smoke. The craving was unbearable, a gnawing beast within me. I realized then that I was no longer mistress of my indulgence. The line had been crossed. I was enslaved. Still, a voice within me whispered, it was worth it. For though the aftermath was misery, the memory of the ecstasy glowed brighter than any candle. The taste of invincibility, the illusion of immortality, the shuddering thrill of desire, they lingered in me, haunting, beckoning, and I knew I would chase them again, no matter the cost. It is strange how swiftly ecstasy sours into exhaustion. For weeks after my fevered night of mania, I lived in a twilight between wakefulness and collapse. I scarcely slept. When I did, it was no true rest, only brief blackouts, punctuated by wild dreams that left me more shaken than restored. I would awake gasping, drenched in sweat, my heart hammering as if still pursued by unseen shadows. My skin, once flushed with artificial bloom, grew pale and drawn. Shadows carved themselves beneath my eyes. My hands trembled when I held a teacup. My voice cracked when I spoke. Yet still I reached for the jars, the bottles, the silver-wrapped sweets. Without them, I felt heavy, lifeless, wretched. With them, I burned, briefly, blindingly, before crumbling into ash. I began to withdraw from society, not out of modesty, but necessity. To appear in public was agony. I cannot maintain conversation without my mind darting wildly. I could not keep my body still. At Lady Hera's gatherings, I saw the same weariness spreading across familiar faces. How grotesque it seemed, men with sunken cheeks still puffing on perfumed cigarettes, women with trembling hands still smearing cocoa cream upon their faces. Their laughter was brittle, their eyes glazed, yet none of us dared stop. To stop was to fade into gray nothingness. Better to burn, we told ourselves, even if it consumed us whole. Then came the first death. Her name was Marianne Blakely, a vivacious woman of only 25, with hair the color of copper and a laugh that once rang like bells. We had met often at soirees, sharing glances of mutual recognition when the trays of bonbons circulated. She was always bold, always eager for another glass, another puff. One evening she failed to rise from her chaise. They said she had swooned, but she never woke. The papers called it a heart weakness, a delicate constitution. Yet we who knew better whispered the truth. Too much powder, too much fire in too frail a body. I attended her funeral, a modest affair in a rain-slicked churchyard. The mourners wore black, their eyes red, but I could not cry. My body was too hollow for tears. As the coffin was lowered, I felt only a tremor in my chest, not grief, but fear. If it had claimed her, why not me? And yet, that very night, I returned home and poured myself a glass of tonic, hands shaking. I drank it down in 3 gulps, weeping as I swallowed, hating myself, yet powerless to stop. Another death followed, then another. Captain Elwood, who swore by his forced march coca tablets, collapsed in the middle of a lecture. Lady Pembroke, famed for her radiant complexion, wasted away in her bed, skin gray despite the creams she slathered upon it. We whispered, we mourned, we shuddered, but we did not stop. How could we? The drug had woven itself into every thread of our lives. It was not merely indulgence. It was toothpaste, it was chocolate, it was cough remedy, it was face salve, it was the glass beside our beds. To abandon it would have been to strip ourselves bare, to face the dreary world unarmed, and so we persisted even as we decayed. I saw it in my own reflection. My cheeks, once flushed, grew hollow. My hair, once lustrous, fell limp. My corsets hung looser upon me, though I had not altered them. I grew gaunt, my body trembling, my mind a storm of restless thoughts that would not still. The craving shifted too. Once, a single bonbon would brighten afternoon. Now I required 5, 6, a dozen, and still it was not enough. My nights stretched into endless marathons of consumption, a spoonful of syrup, a chocolate, a puff, a paste, a cream. Each layered upon the other until my body screamed in protest, yet my hunger demanded more. I tried once to stop. For a day, I refused myself. By noon, I was shivering. By dusk, I was weeping into my pillow, racked with pain so fierce it felt as though my very bones were dissolving. My heart staggered in my chest, my skin crawled with invisible insects. Sleep would not come. I clawed at the sheets, begging for relief. By midnight, I surrendered. I tore open a fresh box of bonbons, devouring them with shaking hands, sobbing with each bite. The agony ebbed, replaced by blissful fire. And in that fire, I felt shame. Shame I buried quickly, smothered by another sip, another puff. Society itself began to falter. The papers grew cautious. Once they sang praises of coca. Now a few timid articles whispered of unfortunate excess. Doctors argued in journals, some insisting upon its miraculous properties, others warning of dreadful consequences. Yet the shops did not close, nor the chemists stop selling. Too many fortunes had been built upon our fever. Too many households relied upon their daily doses to keep despair at bay. And so the masquerade continued. Ladies powdered their cheeks, gentlemen lit their cigarettes, children nibbled their chocolates, the old sipped their cordials. Outwardly, London remained grand, prosperous, dignified. But beneath the surface, we were all trembling. I think often of Marianne. Her laugh echoes in my memory, bright and careless, cut short too soon. I wonder if she too felt the fear, if in her final hours she realized she had surrendered too much of herself. Sometimes when the fever is high within me, I see her face in the smoke, her eyes hollow, her lips whispering, "You will follow me soon," and perhaps I will. For though my body falters, though my mind frays, though death itself casts its shadow across my path, still I cannot resist. The craving is stronger than fear, stronger than grief, stronger even than love. Cocaine has stolen from me my health, my beauty, my peace. Yet it has given me ecstasy, fire, and the illusion of power. And between ruin and rapture, I find myself always choosing rapture, even as it destroys me. Tonight, the house is silent. Even the clocks seem reluctant to tick, as though they, too, are weary of marking time for me. A thin wind presses against the shutters, rattling them like a restless spirit. The fire in the grate has sunk low, a bed of red embers sighing their last warmth. And here I sit at my writing desk, a single candle guttering beside me, my pen poised as if to carve one last confession into these pages. Before me lies a small glass vial. It is nothing remarkable, plain, stoppered with cork, the liquid within pale and shimmering like weak tea. I purchased it from the chemist days ago, telling myself it would be the final one. My farewell, I called it. Yet it remains unopened, resting upon the desk like a lover who knows I cannot resist. My body trembles with craving. My lips are dry, my heart sluggish. My skin crawls with invisible threads, begging for the fire. Every nerve whispers, "Open it, drink, burn once more." And yet another voice, fainter, weaker, pleads, "No, and this. Let it die with you tonight." I do not know which voice will win. I lift the vial into the candlelight, watching the glow ripple through the liquid. How many times have I done this now? Hundreds? Thousands? Each glass promising relief, radiance, life. Each glass leaving me emptier, paler, more enslaved. My reflection in the darkened window startles me. Once I was radiant. Now my cheeks are hollow, my hair limp, my eyes ringed with shadow. I look years older than my 27. My corset hangs loose, my fingers, once delicate, are bony, trembling. I am a ruin of myself, and yet even in ruin, the craving sings. I think of those who have fallen before me. Marianne Blakely, her laugh cut short, Captain Elwood collapsing mid-sentence, Lady Pembroke fading beneath her powders. Their ghosts circle me, whispering warnings, but I do not know if I hear them truly, or if it is only my fevered mind. I think, too, of the nights of ecstasy, of the soirees where smoke curled like silk and laughter turned to moans, of the moments when a stranger's hand brushed mine and my body blazed as though struck by lightning, of the delirious hours when I believed myself immortal, divine. Those nights were lies, perhaps, illusions spun from poison, but they were mine. They were real enough to me, and now, without them, I am nothing. What is a woman without fire, without passion, without life burning through her veins? Only a husk, a shadow, a silent figure drifting through gray mornings. That is what they would have me be, quiet, docile, proper, better to burn even if the flame consumes me. My hand trembles as I set the vial down. I cannot decide. I close my eyes. I remember the first sip, sweet, syrupy, harmless seeming. I remember the laughter that burst from me unbidden, the way my heart lifted, the way the world itself seemed brighter. I had felt alive. I had felt infinite. That moment is etched into me, eternal. And I know, with a certainty sharper than any sermon, that I will never feel that way again without it. The candle gutters lower. The shadows creep closer. I whisper to the darkness, If this is sin, then let it be mine. If this is ruin, then let it be glorious. My fingers curl around the vial. I press it to my lips. For a moment, I hesitate, poised on the edge between silence and fire. My breath shudders. My heart stutters. My soul waits. And then, I do not know what I will choose. Perhaps I will set it down and let the craving consume itself. Let the embers fade. Let the night take me in silence. Or perhaps I will drink and burn one last time, blazing into oblivion with my veins alight. Either way, when the candle dies, so shall I. And these words upon this page will be all that remains of Clara Ashburn, who loved too fiercely, who burned too brightly, and who surrendered herself to the powder that promised life but dealt only death.